Did you know there's a very good chance that British Columbia may not look like the natural beauty that it is for very much longer, and it could possibly start to resemble something out of the Eastern Bloc very soon? And it's all thanks to this guy, David Eby, British Columbia's non-elected premier, and his new plan that he thinks you're too stupid to understand if he doesn't name it as something as ridiculous as homes for people. And that is what we're going to cover on today's video, because the BC NDP has just released their new housing plan, which, well, isn't much of a plan at all. And I'm going to cover the three major points outlined in this plan by the BC REA. Well, the plan is by the NDP, but I'm going to tell you what the Realtors Association has pointed out, all in today's episode of BC is about to get a whole bunch uglier to try and make it affordable, which I don't think will work. But before I begin, if you are a fan of electing your premier rather than having them appointed by their party, please go ahead and click the like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you would like to stay up to date on Surrey and Fraser Valley and BC and Canadian real estate. And of course, if you are looking to move in or out of the province, please go ahead and book a call with me so I can help get you connected with the right person, whether that be in my marketing area of Surrey and the Fraser Valley or somewhere else in the province. So thank you for that. And now I want to hop into this email that I received from the BC REA. So the BC REA is the Real Estate Association, so the group of realtors here in BC, and we have an association, and they basically broke down where they feel the agents like ourselves should be focusing on in this plan and what relates to us. Now, I'm going to point out that much like the Building New Homes Faster Ontario plan, you always have to have a nice fancy name for your plan, and the BC NDP thinks you're stupid, so they have named it Homes for People because, well, who doesn't want homes for people? But moving on, that's besides the point. Basically, David Eby, the unelected Premier of British Columbia, and Ravi Kahlon released their press release, of which I will actually put the link for this full press release down below in the description, because what you have to know about this is not a plan. They say it is a plan. It is not a plan. It is a direction, and it is a scaffolding for a future plan. But they want to look like they're doing something, and those some things that they are doing are actually quite drastic. So stay in tune. I'll keep going, because the Real Estate Association wanted to break down three major points of what they have proposed in this plan. Firstly, the biggest thing, which is going to be, and David Eby has said this is what he was going to do. They want to obviously increase the housing for what they call now the missing middle. Every single time this is my opinion, every time there's more government spending, the missing middle just misses even more and disappears, but that's another thing. So the missing middle apparently now is going to be brought back by introducing legislation that will allow for 3 to 4 units on a traditional single-family detached lot, depending on the size and the type of the lot. So what this means is the first thing that they would really like to do is take every single family home anywhere in the province and immediately make it 3 to 4 units. Now, I'm very mixed on this. On one hand, I think this is going to make areas like mine in Surrey absolutely atrocious looking to live in. And I'm going to get into that a little bit here, because they outline one of the plans of which they would like to model after, which is New Zealand. So we're going to hop into that. But the gist of it is that, yes, you will be able to have 3 legal dwellings, ideally, on each individual single family lot. So in an area like Vancouver, that would probably be a duplex or a house with a basement suite that is legal, and some sort of laneway home, because Vancouver itself is built on a laneway system. However, here in Surrey, our system is built more of an individual front street, almost no laneways at all, and, well, there's a whole bunch of cul-de-sacs. So if you're going to have 3 legal units, you're probably not going to have the garden home in the back and the basement suite down below. You're likely now going to build something that resembles more of a 3-story walk-up. Now, the reason I think that this is bad is because, well, those houses are going to be ugly. Surrey already has a problem with extremely ugly houses that have been built in the past. They actually rectified that issue just recently with the removal of LUC lots, which is something for another video. However, the benefit to this is if you can build 3 legal units, well, there's a very good chance that you don't have to build the McMansion with 2 basement suites down below. And now, for instance, if you're going to build a 5,000 square foot house on a 7,000 square foot lot, you might be able to build something like, I don't know, 13 or 1,400 square foot individual units, which would then be able to house 3 separate families. Now, before I get into the plan, let's talk about the elephant in the room. For sure, housing. Yeah, great. We're going to solve this problem by introducing all of these new legal units. What I did not see in this plan, or at least, hey, if you can find it, point it out to me, is how are you then going to provide the infrastructure needed to support that many people? Obviously, something like parking becomes an issue immediately. And in an area that I live in, like Surrey, there's basically 0 transit. So that's going to be an issue. But let's even think about something a lot more finite than that. If we're adding, I don't know, 3 legal units to every single family detached home in the province, how about things like sewer capacity? Or I'm going to assume now that those buildings are probably going to come with some sort of green initiative, for instance, maybe EV charging stations. And does our old cities have the ability to bring that much electricity to now 3 homes on each and every lot? So for sure, again, this is a scaffolding. This is not a good plan. It's all nice that the BC government says they're going to do something, but they actually pointed towards New Zealand's building guidelines in order to look at this. So here's what I'm worried about. And I think maybe there's some sort of fix to that in this, but I want to outline what they're viewing as a possible fix, because one of the biggest fixes well, let's get into it here very quickly because it's going to become very obvious very, very quickly. So they call it enabling housing density down there. So we got to keep these names, of course, simple. But the idea behind New Zealand's plan is to take all of their single family homes as well and convert them into 3 dwellings with up to 3 stories. Now, what this is going to create, like I said, is more of a walk-up style single family. Like if you've been to New York and you've seen these 3-story, 6-story walk-up buildings, they're going to be very square. Now, that's obviously cheaper construction, which I'm sure the developers and everybody's going to love. It's going to create some really ugly stuff. And it's funny, I was just chatting with a friend of mine about this, and he says, it is no surprise that when you go to these super socialist or even communist countries, that, well, they end up with really ugly architecture because they're trying to jam as many people into housing that is paid for basically by the government. And oh yeah, there's a whole lot of that in here as well, but let's keep going. I wanted to outline and kind of see what you could actually build. So they connected to this building guide from New Zealand, and I thought it was really interesting. So the maximum number of units per site they have in New Zealand is 3 for a single family detached home originally site. The building height, however, is 11 meters. So I'm not really good at this. I'm going to say there's 2.5, 3 feet to a meter. So let's say now these are 30-foot tall homes, and then an extra meter if there is a pitched roof rather than a flat roof. Now, in an area like Vancouver, something like a pitched roof, super important for the amount of rain that we get. But at the same time, flat roof is becoming very, very popular because you can build more on a single family lot if the house height is actually brought down because of that flat roof. A lot of the time, you can actually get an extra story out of it. Ugly buildings, I know, trust me, it's going to look like Eastern Europe, but I guess that is besides the point. But this is the part that I'm hoping that they do bring in, just so you understand this height in relation to boundaries. Now, I'm not in construction. This is not my specialty, but height in relation to boundaries is going to be very important to keep the look that most people are used to and that probably most people think is a better look for the community. The easiest way for me to illustrate that to you is to show you this diagram that I found simply on Google that shows you, well, if a building is a certain height, it must be set back from each property line as set out. Now, this is a 45 degree. The one in New Zealand here on the website is set out as a 60 degree, so it would be a much more pitched slope. So my hopes are really that they don't let you go directly up, because I mean, it's going to look like some really bad. I mean, we've even been through this before. We've been through the 1970s and early 80s where we had really ugly housing that, well, nobody wants to live in today, because that affordable housing is out there, but it's terribly built by previous governments that had the same sort of ideology as our current ones. But let's keep going, because the setbacks are really important. So here's what I don't understand. Currently, in our single family zoning here in BC, or most places in BC, often our setbacks are 25 feet from the front of the property line, 25 feet from the back of the property line, and then 12 feet or sometimes 10 feet combined on either side. So you can shift it 4 feet one way if you need to, back and forth. They're saying that the front yard minimum setbacks are 1.5 meters. And in the back, 1 meter excluded on corner sites, and then only 3 feet on either side of the building. So these are going to create really, really tight buildings. Now, here's what I'm thinking. I could be totally wrong, but if you're going to now move the house to the back of the lot, hopefully that will create parking in the front. Again, it's going to look like absolute garbage. These houses are going to look terrible, but it could be a solution to the parking problem that we're going to have. And in my area of Surrey, we're already running into the situation where people are having to pave their entire front yards to fit the amount of people and people living in the basement suites and other families. So it's just really not going to look good. The saving grace here, though, is the building site coverage. So this isn't going to be 1.5 meters from the front and the back. So it's not going to cover like 90% of the lot. The building site coverage is still only 50%, but that is an increase from today. Here in Surrey, most building codes are about 33% of site coverage. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, including your garage, the actual footprint of the home is not going to exceed about 3,300 square feet. And then normally right now you can go up and down from that. But because of our current building scheme, the top floor can only be 80% of the bottom floor. And obviously with a garage on the main floor for most people, the basement is the same size as the main. They also outline some minimum outdoor living spaces per unit, which is, I guess, good if you're going to have things like 3 barbecues now for 3 different dwellings. Glazing, meaning how much glass do you have? 20% of this street-facing facade has to be glass. So thankfully, again, this should stop us from those big, crazy, kind of concrete-looking, almost communist-style Russian housing. So maybe this will actually help a little bit. And then landscaping, 20% of the developed site with either grass or plants. And my estimation is that is the first thing that will get tossed out and not enforced. Again, probably making the houses just really ugly. There's going to be some more affordable housing that are really ugly. But that's only number 1 on their list. Let's hop back into my email here, because secondly, the missing middle legislation wants to introduce a blanket ruling that all communities and all single-family homes throughout BC must allow secondary suites. And that in itself, I don't think is a bad thing, although lots of cities have fought it. If you're trying to buy in Maple Ridge or the township of Langley or Langley City and you want a secondary suite, those people hate it. So I recommend not buying there if you're looking for a secondary suite and moving to a place that's much more forgiving like Surrey or Vancouver, even Chilliwack. However, this is the part where you yourself are going to be paying for future renters, because the government is beginning in early 2024. Homeowners will be able to access a forgivable loan. So that's not a loan at all. That is free money for 50% of the cost of the renovations to a maximum of $40,000 over 5 years. However, that's not just free money. In order to do that, and here's where you're paying for housing for other people, is that you now have to meet the guidelines to not pay back that money. And part of the guidelines are that you rent out your unit for lower than market, meaning that if you take less money from the tenants, the government will give you more of your own tax money back and some other people's tax money as well. And what that tells me is, well, the government, instead of actually creating housing and helping people get into creating housing, they're paying you to create housing. But there's probably not a real actual benefit to you because, well, you have to charge under market, and who knows what they determine to be market value for that property. So what I want to make totally clear is this is not legalization of all suites, however. This is saying that the cities themselves must allow for legal suites. And that $40,000 loan is not only to often build the suite, but it's to get through the red tape of actual legalization. And then third, of course, on the list is what the NDP has brought up in the past is that, well, they're going to start setting housing targets for the cities. So it's going to be really easy for the provincial government themselves to say, hey, each individual city, this is how many homes you need to make sure are built within your city. So basically sloughing off the responsibility from the provincial government to the municipalities, which again is a massive problem. Trying to get properties approved through a city, well, it has been probably the biggest bottleneck in all affordable housing. In approximately 8 to 10 municipalities is what they're targeting. So they haven't even defined which municipalities yet are going to be given which targets. And then if they stick to their words, which it appears they are doing, there will be penalties for cities that do not meet their minimum criteria for how many homes they need to build. Now, I'm going to link this full plan down below in the description so you can read it for yourself. However, there were some things that I saw and I wanted to touch on ever so briefly. And after all of the fluff is even more fluff. But I want to point out a few things that they are doing, or well, the best part about this plan that I love is they're talking about doing things that they've already done just so they have an extra line item, like ending discrimination of age and rental restrictions in strata laws. But everything here that I'm seeing ends up being nothing that is going to make housing more affordable for you to own. So if you're someone like me that really appreciates owning real estate and understands that that's probably the best way for me to gain wealth and also to have a sense of pride and ownership, well, this NDP plan, you home builders out there and you homeowners out there, this is not for you. This is basically a rental plan. They want to revise co-op housing, which was again, super popular in the 70s. And there are for sure highlighting things like exploring new ways to get more rentals. That's what they want to focus on here, guys. They're not worried about you, the individual who wants to get to a single detached home for your family or that first time buyer trying to get into the market. They want to dump a bunch of money, which is good, to hopefully try and close encampments, which is becoming a real problem here in Vancouver. Revitalize and expand BC's housing property. BC Housing, if you're not aware, I don't know. To me, I would stop spending money there. And then they're going to implement a flipping tax, which is now redundant on the federal flipping tax. Stricter enforcement on short-term rentals. So Airbnb, they're going to shut you guys down. And of course, a crackdown on criminal activity in real estate because, well, they view that as being the real problem and offer more protections for renters displaced by redevelopment. So they're going to do things like charge these speculation taxes, vacancy taxes on vacant land and on airspace above your units, and then they're going to put in protections so you can't evict people to develop that space into the affordable housing that they need. Anyway, all of that is down below in the description so you can have a look for yourself. And yeah, I don't know if I like this plan or if I don't like this plan. I don't know if this plan is a good one financially or a really stupid one, because I view it as probably going to make our city and our province less desirable to live in. So let me know what you think down below in the comments if you're a fan of this scaffolding for a future of BC housing, or if you think there are better options available. Thank you so much for subscribing, clicking the like button, and we'll see you in a couple of days.